let's talk about APIs, right? Because when we build apps, typically we need to show the data in it, right? Like whether it's orders, customers, information about files, documents, whatever you've got, tickets. It's all about data that you show in your apps, and the data comes from APIs. And how often is that the case when you build your app, either the API hasn't been built yet, API isn't available to you yet because in your org you need to get access to it, so you need to get approval to be able to access the data, or maybe the API is being built as we speak with your own team, and then would you wait? Would you try to build your own mocks? Would you want to write code that you know you won't ship, and with that you waste your time? We think that there's a better way, right? So in the next few minutes, I'd like to show you a better way, what we think a more efficient way to work with APIs and to have mock APIs for all the times when you need, whether you need a demo, whether you're building an app and the API isn't there. So basically create APIs that you can easily use, and then at some point when the real API is available, replace it so that you can have a fully fledged app without having to ever write any code that you won't ship. Okay, so this is a part of the feature set that we offer with Dev Proxy. A Dev Proxy is an API simulator that you can use with any OS, any type of app. So the idea is, I don't have an API, I'm building an app. I'd like to show, in this case, some info about the customers. So what I've got here, which you see on the screen, is a JSON file with some info about the customers. The data in here is coming from the Northwind DB, and it's just basically a bunch of customers that we've got and that we would like to show in our app. Right? So typically the way you would go about it, you would go to your code, write some mock API so that you can build your app, or maybe do some weird things like trying to load the data from a JSON file. Basically write a bunch of code that you will need to replace at some point. We think there's a better way. So with Dev Proxy, you can use this to, within minutes or maybe even less, simulate a fully fledged function API, which you can call, right? So the way it works, this is a file that you bring and you define its shape. It can be, again, customers, orders, tickets, whatever you want. You decide its shape and contents. Next, you create a file that instructs Dev Proxy which features you want to use. In this case, we will use the CRUD API plugin, which allows us to do exactly that. Simulate a CRUD API. So CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete. Right? So we will do that. And we want that API to run on this api.northwind.com URL. And we will have another file which then defines the different operations that we want to do. So in this case, we want to be able to get all of the customers, get one, and then create new one, update, delete, and so forth and so on. So with that, let's see that in action. First, I'm going to start Dev Proxy with the config that you've just seen. And in here, we can see that we have 5 actions for CRUD API. Again, 1, 2, created 3, merge, 4, and 5. So we can now use that API to do all of these actions. So let me switch to requests. And let me now issue a REST call, a GET call to this URL, which maps to get all the customers. What does get all do? Exactly what it says. Returns all values that we've got in the file that we use kind of as the backing store. So let's issue that call and let's see if that works. 3, 2, 1, perfect. There you go. So there is a response. So now we have a fully fledged API that we can use in our app to communicate with, and we can do it with our real code, because that is just an API call on your box. The cool thing is, there is no real API behind the scenes. There is no, you haven't deployed anything. You're not running a web server. We haven't written any web API or node code. This is simulated API that we do for you in any shape you want. All right, let's try another go. Let's try to see if we can get this one account here. So let's try to get a customer from here. Voila, we have our response, right? So in here, you can see we get one account, or a customer, and that maps again to the action that we've got here, get one, and we even have this ability where we have a URL with a template, And in here, we define a token, which we then use in a JSON path expression, which is the funky stuff here, which we basically use to look up in the data file that we've got here, which part of the object we want to give back. So in this case, we look up a customer, which maps to the customer ID that we passed on the URL, right? So if we go back to the request, we pass the ID here, and that is how we find the record back. Cool, so all of that works. What if you would try to simulate an error? In other words, maybe the user typed incorrect name, or maybe something. We can do that too. So again, if you pass something that is invalid, we will give you a fully fledged 404 error, basically the same way you would expect from a real API. Cool, so we've seen gets. Can this thing do more? Absolutely. What if you want to, in your app, you're building a part of the app where you create a customer, right? So you want to have the ability where you have a list, and then at some point you will have a new screen, new customer screen, to basically have the ability to add some additional info. We can call a post call too, because again, in our API, we defined a create action. So this API is now capable to support a post call to this URL, right? With a payload. Let's execute that. We get the response back. And now the question is, can we get that back? So if we go back, let's see if we can retrieve it. Yes, we can. What's really cool here, this record was not originally included in our list. There is no Parker in here, right? So in other words, we have this in-memory API, in-memory store, to which we just added a new record, right? So as long as Dev Proxy works, it will keep track of this record, and you can now edit it, delete it, update it, whatever you want to do, right? You can add more, and it will stay it will stay available as long as Dev Proxy work. This makes it for a really great way for you to do a demo or even test if your add part of the app works as you want it to, or your update deletes. You can test all of that without building any dummy APIs. Again, don't write code you will not ship. So far, we've seen all these calls being anonymous. In reality, none of the APIs you use in your work are anonymous, right? So if there is something that doesn't deal with auth, in reality, that's just a toy. And that's exactly what we think. So in this case, we also give you an ability to simulate Entra-secured APIs. Again, there's nothing in Entra. I haven't created anything in Azure. But for your app that uses the API, it will actually think that it talks to a truly an API secured by Entra. Let's see how that works. So originally, I said that my API is anonymous. Let's remove this, and let's enable some of these things, okay? So here, let me enable these two options, and we will talk about like what they are. So the first part is auth Entra. That defines that this whole endpoint, or actually all the endpoints on this API, are secured by Entra. And you can also choose to only have one action behind Entra, or two, but not everything. So all of that is up to you. You have the ability to choose how you want to go about it. When you do that, you have to choose, okay, what are the different things you want Dev Proxy to verify? Like the easiest one, audience, right? So you want to ensure with that the access token that is used on the request is issued for this particular API. So in other words, if you get a token for Microsoft Graph and you try to call this API, it will fail because you're using a token for a different API. Let's see that in action. So first things first. Our API is now no longer available anonymously. So if we repeat the same call that we've done initially, we will get, let's see if that didn't work. I did something. Let's see if I missed a comma. Oh yeah, there's a dangling comma here. Let me remove that. Let's see if that will work. There you go. I am debugging this on the fly. This is live. There you go. Error message unauthorized. Why? Because we're issuing anonymous call without an access token to an API that is no longer anonymous. Cool. So let's include a token here, right? So this is basically the basic way in which you do the bearer auth, right? So you include a token on the request, and again, unauthorized. Why? Why is this unauthorized? If we go all the way back, we scroll past my errors, right? We will see the specified token is not valid. Well, duh, because a token needs to have like three things. It's got to have the header, the body, and signature, right? Okay, so let's include a token with three parts. Let's see if that will work. No, it's unauthorized again because it's not of the right format, right? A JOT token of Entra needs to be a base64 encoded string, and this one is not. Okay, cool. So now we have here a token that kind of looks exactly what we need to have, right? Like it seems like there's a header, there's base64 encoded header, body with everything, and there's a signature part. Let's see if this one will work. Let's run it again. No, again, unauthorized. What's wrong with that? Well, because apparently this token does not includes incorrect audience, right? So here in the error, you can see, right, that we expected the audience of CEDA, which we expressed again here, right? So here, if we go to our API definition that we've got here, this is the audience that we expect, that we allow. Instead, the token that we use uses this audience here, which is incorrect. So that is really an easy way for us to check if the app that connects to an API is working the way it should, right? Whether it's using the correct code to obtain a token without having to write any dummy API or even going to Azure, right? So if you don't have access to Azure, this is a perfect way for you to be able to write actual real code that actually works in production without having to deploy anything to production first, right? Cool. Let's see if this works, because maybe I am showing you something that never works and I just pretend for this to be, like a thing while it isn't. It actually works. If you use a valid token with the right audience, you will be able to authenticate and you will be able to get the data from the API. Cool. What are the other things that we can check? We support checking for things like issuer. So if you have a single tenant app from which tenant has a token being issued, right? We allow you to check for scopes. So if you use a custom API with your own scopes, you can even check if you've got the right scopes. You can even go as far as to say different operations on the API require different scopes, exactly the way it works in reality. Because for read operations, you need different scopes than for writes. So you can simulate all of that in here too. You can even check if the token didn't expire, right? Because that's exactly what you will do for real too. Like if you use a token that you obtained 2 hours back, it will no longer work. And then finally, this is the real thing. Validate the key. So far, I created a token by myself, right? So I just went, decoded it, added that by myself, perfectly fine, right? So let me show you all of that, right? So all of that will work. If I save this and I will issue the same call again, we will have unauthorized. Why? Oh, because the lifetime validation failed. Of course, because the token that I got was created way back, right? So with this option, this code will already not work. So let me comment it out. Let me try again. And let's try the call again. This will work. Cool. As I said, I built a token by myself. So if I were to validate it, signature, it will not work because this token isn't real. I haven't obtained the token from Entra, right? It's not a real token. It's a token that I made by myself. So with that, I will get unauthorized and I will get a big error saying that this token isn't real. It didn't match any of the keys. So in other words, look how cool it is. We just saw that based on a basic data structure that we've got, we were able to stand up a fully functional API with create operations, read all, read one, edit, update, delete, whatever. We were able to do that in minutes without writing any line of code that we wouldn't ship, right? So we have the file. The only thing that we had to add in the instruct, like which URL do we want to use and what are the different features that we want to do. But we actually did more. We built an API, or we stood up an API secured by Entra. And that is a really powerful thing because, again, it allows you to validate that all your code in your app that uses the API works the way as intended. Whether you get the right token from the right issuer with the right scopes, whether you properly deal with things like expiration, whether you do authentic things with it, right? So you can test all of that without deploying anything anywhere. And that is really the whole point, to let you, empower you to work really efficiently. Don't waste time on writing any code that you won't ship so that you can focus on the things that that matter, which is building apps that help the customers and colleagues with whom you work. So with that, thank you. And I would encourage you all to give this a try. I will share in a moment a few links that you can use to check it out. Thank you.